Hey guys, how you doing? It's Brett. This is Classical Learner. I hope you can hear me. If there's any problems with the audio, please let me know. But without further ado, actually, I'll know in a second once this ad passes. Sorry about that. All right, perfect. The audio is working. So tonight I am very excited to have on a special guest, author, and a mother of three children who is an expert in not just homeschooling but unschooling, something that many that are new to homeschooling hear about, but they just can't grasp what that means, what a typical unschooling day looks like. So, without further ado, I'm going to call my guest up and we will get started. So, let me make the call. Hey, Marla.
Hey, Brett.
So we are live on my YouTube channel, and for everyone that's not familiar with you, this is Marla Taviano. She is, well, actually, let me get it so they can see you first, right? That would make a lot of sense. Give me 1 second. All right, let's put that up like that. Let's see if we can get this a little bit better. Yep, that's a lot better. Oh, we got people in the background. All right, I got 3 screens here. Let me just make sure that looks good. It does. All right, fantastic. All right, so Marla is an amazing woman, an author, a mother of 3, and a world traveler. Is there anything else I should bring up in your introduction?
No, that about covers it. Thank you.
All right, very cool. And I hope everyone could hear. If there's any problems with the audio, please let me know. So, why don't we just get right into it? How did you get into homeschooling? Because I know I have a lot of people on my channel that are interested in the topic, but they might be scared to make the leap.
Well, I was homeschooled as a kid, but not the whole time. I started out in a small private school, and when I was in first grade, my teacher approached my mom and said, we would like to skip Marla ahead to the second grade because I had learned how to read when I was 4 by watching Sesame Street. And my kindergarten experience and my first grade experience were that of boredom because we were learning our letters and I already knew how to read. So my teacher wanted to skip me ahead, and I was terrified. I remember as a 6-year-old being terrified because I didn't know cursive, and all my friends in second grade knew cursive, and I thought I can't go to second grade. So I decided not to. Long story short, my mom pulled me out of school and homeschooled me from 2nd through 4th grade, and we knew no one at the time who was homeschooling. So I think my mom was kind of a homeschooling pioneer way back when. So that was I'm 43. This is in the early 80s when she did this. So when I got married and we started having kids, and my husband and I had not really talked about our future kids and their schooling, and I happened to mention homeschooling one time, and he said to me, "Ew, homeschooling." Like, his experience with homeschooling was not a positive one. And I said, "Oh no, it's great, blah blah blah." And I went to I graduated with an elementary education degree, so I had taught school. I considered myself an expert. I had been to a private school myself, a public school. I was homeschooled. Then in university, I taught in private schools, public schools, and I had come to the conclusion that homeschooling was the best way to teach kids. Well, then we started having kids, and around that time I changed my mind, and I thought, okay, maybe it'd be nice to send them to school. So I did. They were in public school. The oldest, so my kids are, right now, they are 18, 17, and 13.
Got your hands full.
When the youngest, no, when the oldest, let's see, So they were the older two are 1 year apart in school. So at one point I had a first grader, a kindergartner, and then a little one. Their last year of public school was fifth grade for the oldest, fourth grade, and kindergarten. So my youngest has only ever been to kindergarten. She's now getting ready to go into the eighth grade. I have to think about that because I don't really pay attention to what grades they're in. So the older two have been, the one just graduated, and I say graduated, and I mean that she came home from a date and we gave her some money for a laptop and put a sign on the on the wall that said, "Congratulations, graduate." So I can't even remember your question. How did I get started in homeschooling? Is that what you?
Yeah, no, that was great. There's a lot to unpack there, and I think it's funny because so many people, everyone sends their children to public school, and then when you ask them about their own schooling experience, you mentioned the difficulties that you had. I mean, when I was coming up through public school, the teachers thought I was terrible. They didn't think I was going to be anything. They said I was trouble. I ADHD. I couldn't sit in my seat. They wanted to put me on drugs. They called my mom to the principal's office. They said, we really think he needs to be on drugs. And my mom told them she would shove those drugs up there. You know what? And if you're out there watching, Mom, thank you. I really appreciate that. So many people have a negative experience. And then on the other hand, I've been fortunate to meet so many great mothers and fathers. And a common thread I find between them is many of them were homeschooled for a few years in their own childhood. And when they think back to growing up, they valued the education they got in their homeschooling more than the public school. So can you talk about your experience growing up and the contrast in the type of education you got during homeschool versus the education you got in public school?
Yeah. First, I do want to say something that I have discovered over the years is that homeschooling or unschooling, which is what we call what we do, is we have to remember that it's a privilege. Because so I don't personally tell people this is the best way to do it. This is if you love your kids, you've got to do it this way. Because I realize my husband and I both work from home, and that is a privilege. He is a web designer and photographer. I'm a writer and an editor. And we have jobs that allow us to be in our home and work and earn money while we take care of our kids. And the majority of people don't have that privilege. If you're working at Walmart or a fast food restaurant or whatever you're doing to put food on the table for your kids, if you can't stay home with them, if you're a single mom, if you're a single dad, then homeschooling and unschooling, it's possible that it could be an option for you at some point, but it's going to be very difficult and very challenging. So I just encourage people to remember that it is a privilege to be able to do this, and not everyone can. So I definitely have opinions personally, but I also realize that I'm coming from a place of privilege. But what I will say about our personal experience, we didn't pull our kids out of school because their school experience was a negative one. So for us, we had a very positive public school experience. And the school they were at, it was a school system in Ohio that, relatively speaking, was a really good school system, had plenty of money. But the way that it was set up was that there were certain areas. So maybe there were 10 elementary schools that went into these 3 high schools. And there were certain areas of the town or the city that were more well off than others. So we actually lived on the south side, and that was a lot poorer. So their school was not as good as some of the others in another part of the school district. But because of that, there was a lot of diversity, lots of kids from other countries, lots of kids who spoke English as a second language. And that was really a positive experience for our girls. So as far as they didn't have the experience that you did with teachers being unfair or unkind, being a teacher myself and having some kids that often disrupted the rest of the class, I can see that side of it too. I'm not defending your teacher, but I'm just saying that teachers are expected to do. It's too much. I taught, for example, I had a third grade classroom at one point, 25 kids, all by myself, no aid, no assistance. You've got 25 kids who are all different, who all need something different, and you're trying to work with their parents, you're trying to work with these kids, and it's an impossible task. Imagine if you were a parent of 25 children and you had to make sure all of their needs were met. And I don't care if all the kids are 8 and they're all in third grade. They're not at the same level emotionally, physically, mentally. So it's just it's a big challenge. So I don't think it's possible for a public school to meet every kid's needs. Now, because of the privilege that I had to be able to stay home and take care of my kids, I could supplement whatever they were missing out on in public school at home anyway. So if they missed out on a great education, I wasn't worried about it. 2 of my kids already knew how to read before they went to kindergarten. My youngest, this is her only experience in public school is kindergarten. So 8 years later, she's still talking about, that's all she remembers is kindergarten. But she'll talk about things. Her memory is that she had to sit quietly and wait while her friends learned their letters. And she had gone to a preschool at a church, it's called Tuesday School, one morning a week. And she didn't want to be, so even at age 4, she didn't want to be different from her peers. So she didn't tell anybody as they learned A on one Tuesday, B the next Tuesday, C the next Tuesday. She didn't tell people that she was reading chapter books at home. A teacher found out, but she hid it for a long time. So the public school, basically there's just not enough resources, there are not enough teachers, and there are too many kids for all of their needs to be met. They're coming from too many different backgrounds. And the schools that have a lot of money have the resources, and the kids in the poorer areas don't. And that's just, it's completely unfair. So again, I forget your initial question. You asked
well, no, again, you know, there's a lot to unpack there, and I think you said some really good stuff. And it is worth noting that the public schools put the teachers in a very difficult situation. They're dealing with many different children at many different skill levels, and the only way that school can be designed, well, I shouldn't say that, I have some ideas, but generally how school is designed is to meet the needs of the average. So if you have a student who's ahead, well, he's going to have to wait for his peers to finish the unit, whatever they're working on, and
Right.
those students get bored. And if you have a student that's behind, that's where it's really tragic, because once the class starts to move on, rather than just doing the obvious thing and saying, you know what, instead of rushing ahead, I need you to be capable when you're 18, not when you're 7. I'm just going to take your time. We're going to master this one skill, and then we'll move on to the next one, which is a much more practical way to educate a person. The show must go on. So the teachers are put in a very difficult situation. And like you, when I became an adult, I wound up being a teacher myself, and I saw firsthand how certain students fall behind and how certain students get bored. And, you know, when I started to figure out what I wanted to do in my life and start Classical Learner, it was to fill the gap and to give parents a different option, that there are different ways to educate children, whether that's homeschooling or, like you said, people can't do that due to their situations. Well, there is no one right way to educate a child, a human being. You can do it in so many different ways, and the key is just knowing where to look and how to get started.
Yeah.
So let me ask you about that. Because when I was reading your book, you know, you had mentioned that you started homeschooling, and before you knew it, without even really planning it, you were unschooling. So what is this mysterious unschooling that new homeschoolers hear about, and they say, Oh, that sounds great. I don't know. What did we just run around in the woods? What is unschooling?
It's a secret. I can't tell you. No. Yes. So part of my hang up, and I'll go back to how we actually started homeschooling. So the girls were in, let's see now, fourth grade and third grade, and the youngest had not started school yet. So my oldest were in fourth and third grade in public school. Everything was going fine. No thoughts of homeschooling in my mind. And I loved our public school, and it was great. Then, after my middle daughter's third grade year, it's the summer. So what? She's 8, I don't know. And she says to me, I want to be homeschooled. Out of nowhere, out of the blue. And to this day, she's now 17. She has never been able or willing to articulate to me what exactly it was. If she had a bad experience in school, if she just decided, I don't know. Since then, she's had some struggles with anxiety and depression. We've gone through some things like that. So it could be that back then something was going on that she couldn't pinpoint, that she knew she was not comfortable in a school situation. So this was halfway through the summer. Fourth grade's coming up. She's not going back to school. She has decided she is not not going back. And I'm kind of freaking out. Like, what do you do? How do you even do this? I don't even know. And long story short, we signed her up for something that's called K-12. I can't remember what it's called exactly now, but it's some kind of public school online. It's available in Ohio, maybe around the country. I don't know. We went to this meeting, signed her up. She got a free computer and textbooks, all the things that would be available to a child in a public school. She got to bring home. And then she just did her lessons online for that year. So her sister was in 5th grade. She's home for 4th grade, and my youngest is 4. And we did this year. It was kind of awful. It was really boring. And I'll be honest, we cheated. Like, there were times when the things that she had to go through and do, I was like, this reading book that you have to read, this textbook is so boring. I'm going to go through and click all the answers for you, and then we're going to go read a novel that we picked out together instead. So that was the end of that. We decided never to do that again. But in the meantime, so that was in August of 2011. In December of 2011, our family of 5 went on a trip to Cambodia for 5 weeks.
If I could pause you right there. So
Yeah.
just for everyone listening, so what a lot of people do when they start homeschooling, because we have a framework set in our mind of what school looks like, and what they do is they decide they're going to homeschool, and they try to set up some form of your typical classroom setting
School at home.
in the home. So from there, like what happens to most people, where did you go from that point? Now you're saying Cambodia? Or where? Go on.
Yes.
Is what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. So I basically did that online public school because she sprung this on me. I had no idea what to do. I didn't know what the rules were in our state, if this was legal to take my child out of school. So I did the safest thing, like you're saying, the safe, legal. I knew I wouldn't have to come up with anything. It was already planned out for me. So I've got one in school, one being homeschooled, and one that's not in school yet. Our family takes a 5-week trip to Cambodia. So I did. My youngest was in kindergarten. Okay, so she was in kindergarten now that I think about it, because I remember I never got to be the mom who had no kids at home because as soon as my youngest went to half-day kindergarten, my middle daughter came home for all-day homeschool. So we go to Cambodia, we come back, and we believe that we are probably going to move there. And my oldest had a really hard time coming back, transitioning from 5 weeks in Cambodia to going back to 5th grade at her public school. So she would wake up in the mornings, she would cry, didn't want to go to school. She'd take mental health days as a 5th grader. It was reverse culture shock, just a bunch of stuff going on. So we thought we were going to move to Cambodia soon. So at the end of that school year, she finished up 5th grade. My youngest finished her half-day kindergarten. My middle finished her online public school. And we decided that we would homeschool for however many months until we moved to Cambodia, knowing we would need to homeschool in Cambodia anyway. As it turned out, this is another long story I won't get into, but 6 weeks before we left for Cambodia, my 34-year-old husband had a massive heart attack and almost died. And we ended up being able to go to Cambodia anyway. The doctor gave him the go-ahead, even though there's no way that anyone in Cambodia could save your life if you're having a massive heart attack. And when we got back in January 2012, we were back in the ER. He had chest pains again, and it turned out that he started having anxiety and panic attacks. That lasted for 3 years. So the time that we thought we were going to be in Cambodia, we were in Ohio. My husband lost his job. We lost our home. The girls were all homeschooled. And it actually turned out, it was complete hell at the time. But now having the girls home, being a family, going through that time together, was the best way we could have handled that time. So we started out that coming school year. So I had a first grader, a fifth grader, and a sixth grader. And we had no money because my husband lost his job. We had no way to get any kind of curriculum. Knew we didn't want to do that online public school, especially with my youngest, who was already reading chapter books. I couldn't imagine her doing first grade online public school and being bored out of her mind. So we just got resources from the library and from the internet, and we had to keep track. In Ohio, you have to keep track of your hours, and I forget how many hours it is, 900 or something, and you write in a notebook what you did. And my youngest laughs because she was in charge of her notebook. So she's 6, and she has this notebook, and she would never remember to fill out what she did that day. And we would watch documentaries. They could count anything they watched on TV or anything they did. We just made it all up. And she would come up to me and say, Mom, what did I do last Wednesday through this Friday?
And I'd say, what did I have for breakfast this morning? I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. So we did that, and thankfully, here again, we cheated. We had great friends who were my girls' public school teachers who we kept in touch with, and we volunteered in their school as homeschoolers. So my youngest and I, when she was 6, we would go and be reading buddies with kindergartners, and she would help teach them their letters, and we would do all that. So at the end of the school year, you could either take a test to see how well your kids did, or they could be interviewed by a certified teacher. So we just had them interviewed by a couple of our teacher friends who just asked them some questions. And these teachers knew them, they knew our family, and they knew that we weren't neglecting their education just because we did things differently. So it was pretty much they sat and had a chat, they signed off on it, and that was our school year. So we did that for almost 3 years, and then ended up moving to Cambodia in January 2015. My husband got well, and we decided to go. Yeah, so the morphing, I can't tell you exactly how it morphed into unschooling, but one of my big hang-ups when I realized that we were going to start homeschooling was I didn't want all the clutter, all the junk. I didn't want tons of things we weren't going to use. I didn't have an extra room. We were in an 800 square foot apartment. I did not have room for a homeschooling classroom set up, any of that. So what I started to realize was, this is just life. I want them to learn as we go through life. So instead of having a separate space for learning, let's just learn everywhere. And I had written books by that time, and people asked me, how'd you write your books when your kids were babies? And I would say, during their nap. I write on my bed. Like, I never went to a coffee shop. I had 4 books published and had never written a word in a coffee shop. Like, I just did it where I was, where I could. And that's how we did life, and that's how we did schooling. And so it turned out that unschooling was the very best fit for us. And for my husband and for me, we were a classic example of people who had an education all the way through, like a 4-year college education. but we're doing things to make a living that we had taught ourselves entirely on our own. So my degree was in elementary education, and I became a published author. And no one in college taught me how to write. I taught myself how to write and then started writing and speaking, and that was what I did. And my husband was a graphic design major with a computer science minor. And when he graduated in 1999, there was barely the internet. So he taught himself web design, he taught himself photography, and that's what he did. So we're thinking we have all this college debt for these careers that we no longer that we no longer have. And our careers that we now have are things that we taught ourselves for free. Something's wrong with this picture. If I wanted to be a doctor or a lawyer or something else, and then I got that education and used it, that'd be different. But I've been writing since I was little, and was never formally taught or never paid anyone to teach me how to write. So
Yeah, well, it's funny, it's school focuses on a lot of things, but probably less than 1% of the population need to know the Pythagorean theorem. But,
yeah,
there's a lot of value in using a child's natural interest, following what they're interested in, and using that to teach real world skills. And you can use that to teach business. You can use that to teach sales and marketing. You can use it to teach art and music and computer coding and all of these skills that they can use throughout life, in which they can operate in a free market that the school system, for the most part, completely neglects. So if you were, well, tell us about an unschooling day. I think a lot of people want to know that. Tell us, what does an unschooling day look like? Take us Monday to Friday. Or Sunday. It doesn't matter, Saturday, Sunday, it doesn't matter.
Okay, well, it's really different for me now because they, like I said, they are 18, they are 17, 18, 17, and 13. So very, very different from what it would have been like when we were younger. So I can back up, if I can remember back to then. But so during this time that my husband was suffering from the anxiety and panic attacks, he was home and had lost his job, could not leave our house without having a panic attack. And so instead of him earning the money for us and us doing whatever, the burden was now on me. And I had always helped supplement the income, but he was the one with the job. He would go to the job and bring home the money. So our lives looked a lot different, and we actually had to work as a team to figure out how we were going to pay the bills. So we lost our house and had to move into a low-income housing apartment, and it ended up being one of the best years of our lives, besides the anxiety, because we met 75% of the people in our apartment complex were refugees from Somalia, Eritrea, Nepal, Mexico. The girls made all these friends from all around the world, and our neighbors, who had barely any money, would invite us over for meals in their home, on their floor. We hardly had any money either. So it was like we're in this together. It was just this global, looking back, I see it as this beautiful, global, amazing, magical time. I know in reality it was harder than that, but our memories of it are really awesome. But our typical day would involve, how are we going to earn money today? How are we going to help dad today? How are we going to, so the girls would babysit. We would do odd jobs for people. They would go read their books, play with their friends, write stories on their laptops, while I edited for people to earn money. And they did a lot of cooking. We became vegan for a year and a half after my husband's heart attack to help him try to get healthier. So there's a lot of researching recipes, a lot of eating vegetables and fruit, and finding out ways that we could cook without using any dairy or meat. So that's one of the biggest things that they learned is how to cook. And for me, and this is another whole different story, but I am not someone who's raising my daughters just to grow up and be wives and moms. If they can be whatever they want to be, if they want to be a wife and a mom, that's awesome. If they want to be a wife and a mom and something else, that's awesome. If they just want to be themselves and go do something. So I know a lot of homeschoolers, at least in my experience, teach their daughters all the homemaking skills, they call it, so that they can grow up and just stay at home and be wives and moms. Well, that's not my intention. I think it's important. If I had boys, they would also be learning how to take care of a home and how to cook and how to do all those things. So basically, I wanted them to learn things to take care of themselves and possibly a future family if they wanted to also. So I just don't want people to be, when I talk about how they learned how to cook and all that, I don't like it when people just assume that's what girls have to do. My girls love to cook. Well, two of them love to cook, one not so much. But they learned to navigate their way around a kitchen. They can shop for things. They can make things, bake things, whatever. And so that's a big part of what we did. They learned all of the household stuff and all of life stuff. Like they know what it's like to budget money. Well, can we buy this or can we buy that? So they were literally hands-on involved in our finances and what we could afford and what we couldn't. And as far as their interests go, they are three very, very, very different kids. So the oldest loves art and has a great talent for drawing, which she got from her father. I can't draw to save my life. The middle one, her big thing that she loves right now, at least, is health and fitness. So she is very, very much into researching the best foods for health, how to put those together, what's good for your body, and what's not. And we go to the gym 6 days a week, and she is strong, and that's her thing. She wants to be, she's the one I said struggled with some mental health issues, and getting physically healthy has improved her mental health in ways you would not believe. So she's taking control of her own health, and that's been amazing. And then my youngest, the one who was reading in Tuesday school, she's the one who has all kinds of interests. I have no idea what she's going to do with her life. She taught herself Khmer. Khmer is the Cambodian language that we've lived here 4.5 years now. We went to school. It was supposed to be just school for adults, and they let Nina come as a 9-year-old and audit the class. But by day 2, she was already up with everybody else, taught herself to read the Khmer script before any of us had ever gotten that far. So she could read the Khmer script. She's learning Greek right now. She has an app and has taught herself how to play the piano. She loves science, astronomy. She has all these interests, and she is poster child for unschooling, because whatever she loves, she goes for it, she figures it out. She writes stories for hours a day, and I've never seen a word of it. So this girl has been writing for 5-6 years on these stories and will not let me see any of it. It makes me cringe sometimes, because she'll say that she just wrote all these paragraphs and just deleted all of them because she didn't like them. So I don't know what she'll end up doing.
She sounds amazing.
Yeah. So she just has all the time in the world to explore all of those things. So here in Cambodia, we live in an apartment. You can see behind me, I'm in the kitchen. And it is 8:34 a.m. here. So we are 11 hours ahead of Eastern time in the States. And we each get up at a different time, do our morning routine. My middle daughter is the most, her routine is the most strict because she's on a routine that works for her. And like I said, in last September, we started going to the gym 6 days a week. So that has been amazing for me. Not something I would have chosen, but I've done it for her and for her mental health. And it turned out to be amazing for me. Imagine that. So we go to this little open air gym. There are times when it's over 100 degrees out. There's no AC. We're sweating like crazy. But we go there. We come back. I do my writing and my editing in between times. In the afternoon, nobody's awake in the States. Everybody's sleeping. So it's good that I'm not distracted by the internet and I can get all of that done. My younger two read tons and tons and tons of books, like tons of books. My older one doesn't. She pretends that she likes to read. She'll start a book and she never finishes it. But she is, my husband started a small web design company here in Cambodia a few years ago, and she worked for him. So she's been working since she was 15, and she's now 18. So as far as a career goes, she's already started it. She can design websites. She can do illustration. She designs logos. She makes Christmas cards, whatever people need. That's what she does. So she's already started on her career with zero college debt and will never go to college. My middle one does not want to go to college either, but she's not exactly sure how to translate her love for health and fitness into a career. But I think there are plenty of ways to do that. And then my youngest, who's starting 8th grade, doesn't know what she wants to do. But if any of my kids do go to college, it would be her. She just loves to learn so much that I could see her going somewhere and taking classes where all the people care about the same things that she cares about. So other than that, we build bamboo libraries here in Cambodia. The girls, we don't, they're not as involved in that on a daily basis, but that's something we go out and we do. So
wait, so just if I could clarify, so when you say we build bamboo libraries, you're talking about you and the girls?
Well, no, actually, okay, yeah. Sorry. we started something 2 years ago that we call bamboo libraries, and it's we don't build them. We partner with local Cambodians, and so one of my friends who is Cambodian. Here's my daughter. Here, we'll come in and wave at the people. Here's my oldest. She's off to do something. You just wave. One of my Cambodian friends, a young woman, came to me and said she had a dream to open a library out in her home village, and could I help? So basically my helping is rallying all of my friends in the U.S. who have money, and she does everything else. She arranges all of the building. So everything is built by local Khmer, and it's all, we hire 2 librarians. We have 5 bamboo libraries now. There are 2 librarians at each library. We have a bamboo preschool with a preschool teacher that we pay. And so these are young adults or teenagers. We have 5 English teachers also. So the librarians range in age from 15 to 22, and they get paid a small monthly salary to just man the library. Kids come in, look at books. They don't check the barrel. It's just an open air library, books on shelves, books in Khmer, books in English. And so my main job is to raise all the money to pay everybody and raise money to buy books, stock the library with books, and then it's an hour drive out to the libraries on really, really bad roads. And you can take a moto or a van. And so we don't go out there super often, but when we do, we'll do art camps, or I don't know if you're familiar with PJ Masks. We just did a PJ Masks art camp with these cartoon characters from the States. And so we'll just do activities, things like that. So we help run them, but the goal is that they are, besides the money that we raise, they are self-sustaining. We don't need to be hands-on to do this, so it's all them. But our family speaks Khmer. I don't speak very well, but I learned how to read the script, so I can go to the library and read books to kids in their language better than I can speak to them. So carrying on a conversation with a kid for me is more opening up a book and reading to them. But that has been, I love books. That's my thing. My thing is books, reading, writing, and to be able to do that here in a different country and share that with these kids has been awesome.
So, dead broke, husband, father, just had a massive heart attack. You move halfway around the world, essentially live in a refugee camp with people that mostly speak different languages, and here you are years later, and the way you describe the unschooling in your daughter's education, I hear so many amazing skills: cooking skills, piano, art, reading books all the time, graphic design or web design, or something along those lines, helping raise money to build libraries, and your oldest is 18 years old.
Yes.
Yeah, that is simply amazing. It is. It really is remarkable what education could look like, and I've really enjoyed speaking to so many different people. I recently worked with a family, or I'm working with a family where I make customized education plans for families, whether that's homeschooling or even if they just want extra education on top of what they're doing in public school. And 5-year-old girl, and your daughter reminded me of it. She loves to cook. So what we did is she hosted a cooking party. So of course she had to plan the party. She had to figure out what groceries she needed in order to cook whatever she was going to cook. She had to do the budget, figure out how much money it was going to be, go to the store, buy the groceries, get everything set up. Then she created a video invitation, because we always want, at least from what I promote, and this is the type of things you can do, a video invitation, because she was going to do some marketing, and she created the video invitation and she sent it to family members, and the family members got it. So she set up her cooking party, and the family showed up, and she gave everyone assignments because she had to incorporate public speaking. There's a 5-year-old girl, and she's giving everyone assignments. You do this, you do that, and organizing everything, putting it all together, and cooking this meal and feeding it to everyone. And then on top of it, because I always encourage families to have their children level up, she also had tickets for sale to her family members, in which they can buy a ticket to get a one-on-one cooking lesson later on. And of course, because they're her family members, they all bought tickets, and a lesson in supply and demand. Family members are suckers. She should have charged more. But it's the type of things you can do with endless potential education, which is what I call homeschooling, unschooling, or education without limits. It's really your creative mind is the limit.
Yeah. Speaking of well, I don't know if you're speaking of this, the video you were talking about. My oldest has started a YouTube channel recently. She's a little behind. She's going to do one a week, and she's only done 3 in maybe 6 or 7 weeks. But it's about her life here in Cambodia. So showing people what it's like to be an 18-year-old American living in Cambodia. But what I love about...
What's the name of the channel?
Time... You caught me off guard. Olivia Joy is what I want to say, but I'll have to check back with you to make sure. Yeah, my youngest is telling me yes, it's Olivia Joy.
Olivia Joy, check that out, people.
Okay, yeah, she's super talented. I think I'm biased, but no. What I am really, really thankful for is the fact that obviously in no time in history have we ever had this much technology at our fingertips, where we can do things that we would not have been able to do. So for someone unschooling 20 years ago or 10 years ago or 5 years ago, it's so different now. I've had a lot of people ask me about technology, not wanting their kids to have too much screen time or different things. And there's so many philosophies about that. But the fact of the matter is, this is where we are in our society. This is where things are going and moving. And these young kids are primed and ready to already know how to use all of this stuff. Like a 5-year-old making a video invitation for her cooking class. I just think it's really cool how technology, like for us, we had family members who lived in Indonesia when I was growing up, and we would make a cassette tape of our voices and send it to our cousins, and they would get it 3 months later in the mail, and then they would send us this cassette tape back. That's how we corresponded with them. My girls and their cousins have cousin things set up on Snapchat, and they're on Instagram, they're this, and they're FaceTiming, and we are on the opposite side of the world, and yet we can stay connected with everybody. So that's just a side note, but I love this time in history. It's the perfect time to unschool.
Yeah, and the education, it could be anything, it could be anywhere. You can travel, you can show your children the world if you're fortunate enough to be able to do that. And I mean, rather than talk about the Sistine Chapel, you can go see it. And there's so many different things you can do with it. One thing I did want to ask you is you had mentioned earlier about keeping up with the regulation. So with the unschooling, what is that like in terms of documenting what you're doing? What do you have to do?
Well, if you move to Cambodia, nobody knows about you. So it has been a while since I have had to report to anyone. So I mentioned before that in Ohio, you can meet with a certified teacher and they interview your child at the end of the year, talk about what they've learned. So that's what we did in Ohio. But we skipped town in January of 2015 and have not looked back. So at the end of that school year, no one knew where we were. And at the end, so at the end of next year, I will have had to graduate completely. And then if we were to move back to the States at some point, it would just depend on what state we lived in and what our youngest decided to do. My sister, for example, homeschools in South Carolina, and I know there you have to join some kind of homeschooling coalition or something that it's $30 a year, and they are just the people that hold you accountable. I don't know that you need to do a lot of extra work for that, but so she did that with her kids, and then this past year she joined, I don't know the terminology for these things, but something where her kids meet with other homeschoolers a couple days a week, and different moms teach them different things. And so that's accepted by the state of South Carolina as what you do. So being a part of that, they don't have to report anything else. So I think every state is different, and I get that a lot. And I've met some people here in Cambodia who actually left their country because it's illegal to homeschool in some countries in Europe. So as far as I know, the U.S. is pretty free and open as far as that goes, but I think each state has its own set of regulations. For the most part, I think you can get around them, and depending on who you're working with and how they feel about it. Basically, it's set up because in the kids' best interest, I hope, that they want to make sure kids are just getting an education. So if you're a family who clearly cares about your child and has pulled them out to teach them yourself, then I don't think they're super worried about you. Maybe I shouldn't say that because I don't really know that for sure. But that was my experience in Ohio.
Yeah, from what I have found, it's not something that's overly strangling, no matter, I mean, some states more than others, but even the states that are the worst in terms of regulating what you're doing, it's not something that's really going to hold people back. But I think it's something that is good to talk about just for someone who's scared of the mountain ahead, like, how can I do this? How can I deal with the regulations? That it really is something that, yes, you have to look into it a little bit, but it's not something where once you do look into it, you're going to go, oh no, I can't handle it.
Yeah, and one thing I want to say is people are worried about us a lot. What if your kid's this, and what if this, and what about this, and what about this? And in my books, I've written 2 books. The one you mentioned is my first one, an Unschooling Manifesto is the one that I wrote at the beginning of our journey. And then I just published a second one last year called Unschooling, the Honest Truth, which is kind of the anti-unschooling manifesto. It talks about how things have played out for us in real life and how often I felt like a failure. But then looking back on it, realizing that it was just life and that's how it happens and things aren't perfect and it's okay. So it ends up being an encouraging book that says, hey, even if things don't go as planned, that's all right. But
where can people get your book?
What's that?
Where can people get your book? Your books?
They are ebooks, so they're available on Amazon for Kindle, Barnes and Noble for Nook, iTunes Store or Apple or whatever that's called. And yeah, and they're just $2.99. So great deal for these ebooks. And my oldest illustrated the covers for me, so we incorporated that into it. But what I was going to say was that people are concerned, like, what if they don't learn this, or what if we miss this, or what if this? And I asked on Facebook a couple years ago, I asked for people to tell me what they learned in school that they are using now in their daily life. Excuse me. And the answers really were funny to me, because people were grasping at straws to try to come up with things that they learned in K through 12. And most of their answers ended up being the same. Like, there was a handful of answers, like typing. I learned how to type. I use math when I bake cookies and I measure things. I learned how to write this. They were just coming up with things. And it's funny to me that typing came up over and over and over again. You go K through 12 and you learn how to type. My youngest, or any of my kids, went on it's like free typing games on the internet where you can teach yourself how to type in like 2 days. And even math. So one of my daughters is more concerned than the others about, what if I don't know all this math? Well, she gets on Khan Academy. I don't know if you're familiar with that. And it just goes through, and you can learn math. It's been proven that you can learn K through 12 math in X amount of weeks or whatever. So anything, basically, that they did not learn at the time when the other kids learned it, they can learn it today if they want. And the thing is, we would tutor a lot of the kids in our apartment complex. We had a tutoring program. And we had a really hard time finding adults who could help the high schoolers with their Algebra 2 or with their geometry. Why? Was it because they didn't take those classes in high school? No. It was because we forgot everything we ever learned. I graduated at the top of my high school class, took calculus, took every math class that my high school offered. Do I remember how to do Algebra 2? No. I have no idea. Could I go back and learn it and remember? Yes, but what good did it do me if I don't remember? What do we remember from what we learned? Not a lot, unless we really cared about it at the time. And that's what I always tell people. If you care about something and you learn about it, you're going to remember it. If you don't care, it's going to be gone. And if you didn't learn it then, you can learn it now. It's not too late. And you can learn to type, and you can bake cookies, and you can do whatever it is that you think school helped you with. And another thing people have said, well, your kids need to learn how to sit still, or they need to learn how to do things that they don't like to do. If you just let them do whatever they want, then they don't understand what it is to do something they don't like to do. And to that, I say, listen, and I shared a little bit of our story with my husband and the things we went through. They've done a lot of things they don't want to do. They don't want to hang up the laundry, and they don't want to do the dishes, and they don't want to clean their rooms, and they don't want to this. And guess what? They do it. But I would rather them do dishes when they don't want to do them than do some kind of math or science or whatever that they're not in the mood for. We all do things in life that we don't want to do. But like you said, the Pythagorean theorem, if they're not going to use that later and they don't care about that, then why spend so much time doing it just to do something that you don't want to do?
You know, it's funny because most people, unfortunately, I don't know, most people, a lot of people, unfortunately, spend the majority of their lives going to a job for some corporation that they absolutely hate. They go 5-6 days a week for 8+ hours a day for 40 years. They get kicked on the butt on the way out the door. And when you look at the way the public school system is structured, it really is, in its nature, preparing students for just that, because what they're being asked to do is go where you're told to be, where you're expected to be, 5 days a week, 181 days a year, 8 hours a day. When the bell rings, go from one class to another. Don't worry if it's the work you want to do or not. In fact, oddly enough, in school, the work, it doesn't even matter because the bell rings after 45 minutes, and most classes, it's not where you're going to keep working on something and build something and have pride in it. It's just, well, you did these worksheets for 45 minutes and now, well, just throw them out. And it really is preparing children to be corporate workers and work that job that many people hate, rather than following their interest, using that interest and channeling it to build real world skills so that they can live a better life than most people live. And it's a shame that it's structured that way.
Well, and I did a lot of research back when I was starting, and that's why the public school system was set up. It was during the Industrial Revolution, and kids were out on the farms with their parents, and they needed factory workers. And so they started bringing kids in early to sit in schools, to be quiet, to get in line, to obey, to do what they were told. And then when they were done, they could go right into the factories and continue to do that. And this is a side note, but I have an Instagram account called White Girl Learning, where I read books all by Black, Indigenous people of color, and learn about history and the world from a different point of view, from the white-centered point of view that I grew up learning. And I think a lot of times in school, it's also kind of not necessarily political, but maybe, where you're just learning what the teacher wants you to learn and the way they want you to learn it. When I went through school, all of the founding fathers of the U.S. were these great, amazing men who had everybody's best interests at heart, and they were wonderful and blah, blah, blah. And now I'm learning the truth of history from the perspective of enslaved people or indigenous people or whoever. And so often we don't even think to question what authority is telling us. And that's kind of the point too, where we need to be compliant. We need to be citizens that will just go, do, not question, not be bothered by the things that we are learning. And I've had to unlearn so much of what I did learn. And I'm just really thankful that my girls didn't ever learn it in the first place like that, where it was indoctrinated into them. They can learn for themselves. They can find out for themselves what the truth of history is, what they believe about the world, about how the world was made, how the world is, injustices in the world. So I just think when you are told what to do and what to learn and how to do things, you don't even have that capacity anymore to question. To say, you know what, I don't know that this is exactly right. I don't know that this is how it should be. And I want my girls to be able to do that. So I had two of my girls did very, very well in the school setting and could do what their teacher needed them to do, did very well on tests. And one of them is very much, why do I need to do that? Why is it like this? I don't believe that. I don't want that. And so I wanted all three of them to be able to form their own opinions, to make up their own minds, and to think for themselves and not be taught what to think.
Yeah, I mean, the primary lesson that school teaches and has taught to all of us is that outsource your thinking to authority and capitulate to authority, that we all have our place and that we shouldn't question things. That gets back to what you were talking about earlier with the notion that children should be tasked with memorizing rather than just everything should be critical thinking. I mean, not everything, but a large portion of it. And, you see so many parents, you see adults and they're upset that their adult child has completely different values than them, that they don't relate to their adult child. Well, when you send your child somewhere else to learn what other people are telling them to learn, they're going to pick up if you want to call it the values, the morals of the other people they're spending all of their time with. And one of the great values of homeschooling is that you can pass your family legacy, you can talk to your children about your morals, and you can get out into the world and show them how those morals apply. How has your belief system and your faith applied itself in the education of your daughters?
Well, that is a very interesting question that we probably don't have time for the whole answer, because I have been going through what I would call a faith shift in the past decade or so, and it really has a lot to do with my eyes being open to the world around me and to, like I alluded to, the perspective of people who are not white like me. So I grew up in a very what I call a sheltered environment. My small town was almost completely white, out in the middle of the country. And so when you're in a place like that, where you just don't know what it's like to be someone in Cambodia, or to be someone who's Black, or to be an indigenous person, or to be an immigrant or a refugee or anything like that. And so you see the world through your specific lenses, and that's how you think everything is. And everything changes when you start to get outside of your bubble and you start to meet people in the real world. And so some of the things that you think and that you believe are just very well, I don't even know where I was going with that. It's just it shifts things. So I grew up in a very conservative Christian home and was very conservative even as an adult. I just went the direction that I had always gone, and just didn't know a lot about the world around me. So bottom line is I still call myself a Christian, but a lot of, especially in the last 2 years, with this new administration and some things that have come up, and how a lot of people I know have aligned themselves with things that I don't agree with and are doing great harm to people, I think, in our country. Basically, my eyes have just been open to injustice, that life is not fair for everybody, and I want it to be fair for people. So putting myself on the side with the people who've been oppressed, who've been marginalized, whether it's because they're immigrants or refugees, or their skin is a different color, or they're from a different place or a different religion. And so I believe that we are to love God and to love our neighbor as ourselves. And so whatever it is that I can love my neighbor. So here in Cambodia, loving my neighbor means loving my neighbor as myself. What do my kids have? They have books, and they have access to education, and they have the ability to learn a second language, and to make something of themselves and to earn money. And so that's what I want for my neighbor. I want my neighbor's kids to be able to have access to books and education and all of that. So, and so back in the States, when I do my Instagram and I'm sharing stories from a wide variety of people, I want things to be fair. I want what I have as a white person to be what my Black neighbor, my Somali neighbor, my Nepali neighbor, my gay neighbor, whoever it is, I want those people to have what I have. So that's kind of my main mission in life, is to share God's love and to share what I have and to educate people on the fact that things aren't just in the world. They're not just in the U.S., and they're definitely not fair around the world. So opening people's eyes to that, and then showing how easily we can help make a difference. People are shocked when they see that they can give $25 a month and it supports a young person to be a librarian for the month. Like it's not a lot of money, but it goes pretty far here, and it's more money than they've ever had. So just making the world more fair, more just for everybody.
Yeah, and I think what your story and perspective displays is the power that homeschooling gives you or anyone else as a parent, that you have this set of values and you are able to transfer that to your daughters and show it in action. You're able to take them to Cambodia and have them get involved in helping build the libraries and seeing from other people's perspectives and talking to other people, those are your values, and you're effectively able to show your girls why those are your values, whether they adopt them or not. And conversely, someone who might come from a completely different perspective from you can do the same thing. Maybe someone who likes the way the world's operating right now is able to tell their children why that is and show them why that is and why they have those values. But it is infinitely better, in my opinion, than just sending your children off for the majority of their childhood and then complaining when they're adults that they think completely differently than you.
Yeah. It's awesome to be able to have the time and the freedom to have these conversations, these talks with my girls. So I'm just super, super thankful for that. Even people have asked me, oh, your girls are great. How can I get my kids to be more like that? And honestly, a lot of what has formed their character is the hard stuff that we've gone through. So I wouldn't really wish that on anybody, but I tell people who they are, who I am, who my husband is, has been shaped by the hard stuff in our lives. So you don't just get, and they're not perfect kids, but they're strong and they're compassionate. And that's largely because of they've had to be strong, and they've been hurting themselves. So they've felt pain and hurt and struggle and are able to be more compassionate to other people. And they've been around people. When we lived at the apartment complex, and all their best friends were Muslim refugees from Somalia or Nepal. And then if they hear people saying that all Muslims are terrorists or whatever, to them, that's a no-brainer. That they know Ikra and Ayan and all of their friends who just were young 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds like them. To them, Muslims are not terrorists. They're friends. We knew people who were undocumented immigrants from Mexico. So when we see people shouting to build a wall and keep people out, we know these people intimately. We know their stories. They invited us over for dinner and made us meals with a little bit of money that they have. To us, these are people, real friends, real stories. And if you don't know any people who are different from you, then it's very easy to say, oh, those people. We don't. And so that's the biggest thing. Whatever your belief system, I just think it's super, super important to get to know people and to listen to people who are different from you. It doesn't mean you have to change what you believe or change your religion or change your values. Just listening to other people and getting to know their perspective, I think it can just it just really makes you more of a compassionate human being.
Yeah, I always tell people, if you ever read Ben Franklin's autobiography, he was, for the most part, homeschooled, and his father, once a week, would pull a person off of the street, didn't matter who they are, any background. He purposely looked for people with different backgrounds, and he would make them dinner, complete strangers. And he would invite them into his home, and he would have Ben sit there, and he would just have Ben talk to complete strangers about what they think about the world and what their life experience has been, because his father wanted Ben to have a well-rounded perspective in dealing with people that are like him and people that might be a little bit different. So on that note, if you could give any advice to someone looking to get into homeschooling who are just started, what would that be?
Oh gosh. I don't know. I think it depends on the age of your kids, what their past experience with school is. I would just say, I guess, that you are the parent and you know your kids best. And so you have lived with your kid for however long this kid has been alive, and that just makes you more of an expert on your child than any teacher ever could be. As a third grade teacher with 25 kids, there's no way that I knew any of these kids as well as their parents knew them. So I think the fear is that I might not be qualified. And when I tell people this, they tell me back, yeah, but you went to college to be a teacher, so you are qualified. Well, let me just tell you that I learned very, very little in college about being a teacher.
Yeah, right back at you.
Classes,
yep.
It was supposed to be, my class was supposed to be how you teach math to elementary school students. But what it turned out to be was the professor had to actually teach the math, the fifth grade math, to the college students. So I was basically tutoring my college classmates on how to do fifth grade math because they forgot, so they could then teach it to fifth graders. It didn't learn much at all. So I don't really consider that me being an expert. What I know is that you can learn with your child. Even as a teacher, I taught fifth and sixth grade gifted and talented kids for a year in the public school. We were learning things that I had no idea about. So what did I do? I learned right alongside them, as long as I could keep one step ahead of them. And sometimes I couldn't because they were brilliant. So there were times when they would teach me something, or there were times when I would say, you know what, I don't know the answer to this. Let's find out and come back tomorrow with what we've discovered. So I think the biggest encouragement I can give parents is the whole point is not for you to be the authority with all of the answers. The whole point is to help your kids find the answers. So you not knowing everything is going to be to your child's advantage, because it's going to force them to find out on their own, which is the skill that's going to keep them going when they're out of the house and mom or dad aren't there with all of the answers. They can call you up on the phone or FaceTime if they have a question, but generally speaking, anything they need to know is going to be easily accessible for them.
Well, there you have it. I think this has been very helpful to a lot of families that are looking to get into homeschooling and take that leap. So I really appreciate you sitting down, having a good conversation with me, and sharing your life experience, because sometimes people just need to see someone else that have done it so that they can take the leap and feel a little bit more comfortable doing it themselves.
Yeah, thanks so much. This was fun.
Anytime. So, all right, Marla, thank you, and I'm going to go get ready for bed, and you enjoy your day.
I will. Thanks a lot, Brett.
Take care. All right, and I think I'm still live here. There we go. I am still live here. So, all right, this has been a lot of fun. Thank you guys for tuning in. www.classicallearner.com, Classical Learner Today on Instagram, and we will see you later. Bye-bye, guys.